Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first virtual event of Flow Chennai. I'm Prasanna Vasanadu, Secretary for Flow Chennai this year. It is an honor and my privilege to be here with all of you. I will quickly touch upon some pointers. This event will last approximately 1 hour, and there will be a question and answer session at the end. If you have any questions for our speaker, please submit them via the Q&A feature on our Zoom screen, and we will get to them during the Q&A session. Please note that this call is being recorded for our records. I now welcome our past president of Flow, past chairperson of Flow Chennai, and president of FICCI Tamil Nadu, Ms. Kavita Dutt, to say a few words. Thank you.
Kavita, you're mute. You need to unmute.
Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. No, you're mute, Kavita.
I know, I think. How about now?
Perfect.
Okay. Very good afternoon to all of you. It's wonderful to connect digitally, though many things have changed and we look for the new normal. The warmth and the camaraderie of the Flow members stays to be cherished. I'm fascinated at the way FICCI Flow has emerged over the years from small beginnings to being one of the oldest and the largest women's business associations in Southeast Asia. Standing tall for promoting entrepreneurship and professional excellence in women, Flow Chennai has touched the lives of many women through seminars, workshops, skilling, and capacity building programs. The organization has been addressing many eminent speakers and thinkers like the then RBI Governor, Mr. Raghuram Rajan, His Holiness Dalai Lama Sadhguru, Ms. Naina Lal Kidwai, Indra Nui, Arnab Goswami, and Honorable Minister Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, to just name a few. It's our pleasure to have here Ms. Roshni. It's like a breath of fresh air to have a young and inspirational leader with us. To you, Rinku, and your team, wish you the best. I'm sure it's going to be a great experience. FICCI Tamil Nadu looks forward to meaningful partnership with you and your team. All the very best. Good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Vasvi, can I request you to please carry on from here?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon to our dynamic chief guest, Roshni Nadar Malhotra. All my Flow friends, I am so happy to be here today. Big thank you to Rinku for inviting me. I've had a very close association with Chennai. It's almost been like a second home for me and my family. Most of my in-laws shifted here in 1973, and some of their closest friends are still those who they made in Chennai at that point. Our company had our first plant set up in Chennai. We had a home on Greenways Road, and my husband and his siblings all went to good old Shishya, which was also one of the inspirations for the Sri Ram school, which my mother-in-law went on to find later. Unfortunately, I don't get to visit often enough, so it's wonderful to be here in this virtual way. The last 2 times that I came to Chennai was actually thanks to Flow. When I had come for, in my presidentship, I had come for the Flow Awards hosted by Meena Mohan and the wonderful Silver Jubilee celebrations, which was hosted by Anupama Shivaraman. The Chennai chapter, now in its 27th year, has had a wonderful and illustrious history. And I have to share that it's the chapter which has actually thrown out the most national presidents, 4 of them, more than any other chapter in Flow. And they've all done us proud: Indra Dutt, Usha Krishna, Surekha Kotari, and of course, our very own Kavita. Each one of them has laid a strong foundation for the chapter. I must also acknowledge all the chapter chairs: Dipali, Anupama, Meena, Sudha, Vijaya, and all those before that, for the fabulous job that they have done. The quality and the content of the programs, member involvement, disaster relief work, all kinds of things that liaising with the local police and the government, they have really brought laurels to the chapter. And I'm sure Rinku and her team is going to just continue to raise the bar. And I wish them all the very best of luck. As Kavita said, we are very proud to be the oldest and largest women's chamber of commerce in Southeast Asia. And it truly is a privilege to belong to Flow. My personal journey with Flow has been very enriching. I joined Flow in 2008 when I was invited onto the YFlow committee. I went on to be the YFlow chair, was a governing body member with many of you for many years, and then went on to become the national president in 2017. It's been a journey, of learning, growing, challenging myself, and making some wonderful friends across the chapters. But as with anything, the more you put into it, the more that you will get out of it. So I encourage all Flow Chennai members to come forth, engage, give your ideas and time, and become a part of this inspiring, empowering, impact-making community. Speaking of impact, I'd like to introduce you to someone whose name is synonymous with this, Roshni Nadar Malhotra, a lady of many talents and accomplishments, truly in a league of her own. Roshni is the CEO and the Executive Director of HCL Corporation, Vice Chairperson on the Board of HCL Technologies, the Chairperson of its CSR Committee, and a Trustee of Shiv Nadar Foundation. Channelizing her various passions, Roshni is the driving force behind Vidya Gyan, a transformational leadership academy for meritorious and underprivileged students. Also, being very passionate about wildlife and conservation, Roshni established the Habitats Trust in 2018 to protect India's natural habitats. Roshni has received several accolades. Some of these include being featured in the Forbes World's 100 Most Powerful Women in 2017, 18, and 19 consecutively. She was recognized by the think tank Horasis as the Indian Business Leader of the Year 2019. A fun fact that some of you may not know is that way before all this, in 2013, Roshni was also awarded by YFlow Delhi for excellence in business and philanthropy. And in spite of her many awards, I would like to think that this is one that she holds close to her heart. Roshni is married and has 2 sons. How does she do all this so effortlessly, efficiently, and in such a meaningful way is what we are all excited and waiting to learn. So without any further delay, I'd like to request Rinku to take this session forward. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vasvi.
Thank you, Vasvi. Hello, everyone. It's great to have so many of you present with us virtually today. And I'd just like to point out that apart from those who are present on Zoom, we do have Facebook Live, where we actually have college students from 3 of the prominent colleges in Chennai and the SSN universities across viewing this program. So definitely are on board with a lot of youngsters today, and they're all ready to be inspired by you. So without much further ado, I would just like to say a very warm hello and a virtual handshake to you, our esteemed guest for the day. At a young age, you've scripted a corporate story of incredible success. You featured 54th in the Forbes World's 100 Most Powerful Women list in 2019. What have been the most important milestones of your corporate journey, and what does leadership mean to you?
Oof, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm so delighted to be here. And I'm so delighted to be able to see everybody in person, if not physically. At least that's something that we can do now. I think that I can't really narrow it down to a few milestones, but I think I have to give a lot of credit to my parents for taking certain risks. And I mean, most of us present here, as parents, you know, risk is not something that comes naturally to us when it comes to bringing up our own children, because, you know, you're always trying to forge the safe way forward or ensure that, you know, they're well prepared. Your entire time goes into, you know, making sure that they're well prepared. And I think that, when I was growing up, and I'm an only child, I don't have any siblings. And I think when my father was building HCL, even though, let's say, he had in the back of his mind that I would come back and I would work at HCL, just a first decision when I went to the US for my undergrad. I did my undergraduate degree in actually television journalism and film. Now, any good non-risk-taking parent would have just pushed me into engineering because they know what I would be doing as I would be returning to. So I think that's the first point of allowing me to have a certain amount of independence and a discovery for myself and of myself. Then I think after I graduated from undergrad, I was working at Sky News in London for a few years as a news producer. And I think even allowing me to just be was another risk, Then came a conversation I had with my father while I was still working at Sky News in London, where he said that, I think that you should do business school. And I love the way he put it. He never mentioned HCL. He never mentioned any of that. He said that tomorrow, if you ever want to run a media company of your own, you're going to need some business skills. So it's good to do an MBA. So, it wasn't even pivoted towards HCL as such. So, of course, one went and one did pursue my MBA at Kellogg. And then even at Kellogg, I think, I got to explore management strategy on one side and social entrepreneurship on the other side. And just around that time, I think in 1994, was the first institution that the Shiv Nada Foundation established, and that was the SSN College of Engineering, which is in Chennai. And that was the only institution that was there. And I think that, my father, along with a wonderful team of people who are still at SSN, most of them, really nurtured that. And so when I returned after business school in 2008, I think it was allowing me to work at HCL 50% of the time, but even then allowing 50% of myself to really explore my own entrepreneurship journey at the Shiv Nada Foundation. So all the other institutions of the Shiv Nada Foundation, the Vidyagyan Leadership Academies, the Shiv Nada schools, the Shiv Nada University in the North, the Kiran Nada Museum of Art, all of that actually came after 2008. And, and in most of those institutions, I think I've had a good entrepreneurial role to play. So I think that my journey or my milestones along my career have really been, my parents' ability to take risks on me, throw me into the deep end. As soon as I returned from business school, at the age of 28, I had zero management experience, and I just worked at Sky News. And within the first 1 or 2 months of being back, I was also made the CEO of HCL Corporation. And, immediately. And, of course, there might have been a lot of criticism around that. But I think from a parent's point of view, it's really throwing you in the deep end and seeing if you're able to swim. And I think that if you're able to have that entrepreneurial spirit, and really more than anything else, that have that entrepreneurial gut to be able to take risks with people or with your ideas, I think it shapes you in a very different manner. So, so I think that's really the milestones that I can remember. Now I can't remember everything else. It's been too long, but I think that's where I'm at.
And what does leadership mean to you today, where you stand?
So I think the world that we live in today, I think leadership means working with other people. And that is really what it boils down to. The best leaders that I've had an exposure to, a lot of them in my short career, are really able to get the best out of other people. So I think that that's really what leadership means to me, is that you realize that you have certain skills, and any great leader will tell you that they don't have all the skills. So they surround themselves with people who have skills which are different than theirs, but then they all try to perform at the highest level. And I think the best leadership qualities are what you're able to extract from other people, and allow each one of them to feel empowered and a leader in their own right.
Great. That was really insightful. Thank you. So, apart from being a corporate leader, you also come across as someone, and you've proven to be someone with a very strong social conscience. And you are an inspiration for women across the world, not only India. What makes you see this balanced path?
Well, honestly, Rintu, I don't even think it's social conscience. I think what's missing in a lot of people in today's day and world is just a conscience in general. So if you can even get that much right, I think you're doing a good enough job of being human. And again, I think that I don't necessarily look at it as a social conscience as much as I look at it as an entrepreneurship opportunity. So whether it's a Vidya Gyan or whether it's a Habitats Trust, it's always identifying in my mind a certain gap or a certain opportunity which is there, and can I go and make use of that opportunity? And so for example, every crisis, every problem can either be a problem or it can be an opportunity. And for me, I think that having a social conscience is much more feeding into my entrepreneurial spirit. And so it just happens to be social, but I love what I do. So for me, it's just great work.
Speaking of great work, I think your vision of leadership at the bottom of the pyramid has had some amazing results. Would you care to share some more light on that?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the Vidya Gyan Leadership Academy. We founded that at the Shiv Nada Foundation in 2009. Got 2 campuses in UP, one in Bulandshahr, one in Sitapur. And the whole model and idea was actually germinated by my father and the late TSR Subramaniam, who was former Cabinet Secretary of India. And, both of them good Tamilians used to always say that our Janbhumi is Tamil Nadu, but our Karmbhumi is UP, because he was also from the UP cadre. And they said that, Uttar Pradesh is the most populous state in our country. It's now over 200 million in population. If you just focus on Uttar Pradesh, it could also be the 6th or 7th largest country in the world. We don't even have to touch India. And, there are millions of children in Uttar Pradesh who could be the best, they could be the brightest, but they don't have the tools that you and I have. So instead of just focusing on correcting the government system, how do you expect them to actually compete on a level playing field if you do not provide the same resources that a child like myself has? So, we even looked at the elite boarding schools of India, Doon School or a Sanar or a Mayo. And especially when you look at the Doon School, it's not such an old school. I think it's about 70 or 80 years old. Very small in terms of student body or alumni base. But look at the leaders that they've produced in the varied fields that they have. Whether it's in, government, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in music, whether it's in business. I mean, the list goes on. So obviously there is an ability to infuse certain leadership qualities at a much younger age. And how do you expect rural underprivileged children, families with income of 1 lakh and below from UP, to compete with even children of, a Shri Ram or a Vasant Valley or a Shiv Nada school, if you don't give them a level playing field? You can't just say survival of the fittest. The fittest only survive if the level playing field is the same, so Vidya Gyan is one such endeavor. It's still a social experiment, but we've had 3 batches graduate. I've got students at Babson. I've got a student who was supposed to go to Cornell this year, and his admission is deferred. I've got a student at Bryn Mawr. I've got a student at Wellesley, IIT Bombay, IIT Guwahati. We've got a couple of students at SSN, a couple of students at Shiv Nada University. I mean, the list goes on. And it just goes to prove that underprivileged children, they could be underprivileged. They're from the rural background, coming from a fully Hindi-speaking background, come to Vidya Gyan in grade 6. at the age of 10 or 11, have 7 years in Vidya Gyan, and once they're out, they're no different than me. So I think that it's possible, it's doable, and it requires a significant investment, not just of funds but also of time, and also I think of sheer belief and commitment. And so that's really been the most exciting project that I've been a part of and headed. And as we spoke a little earlier, just before this lockdown happened, I was in Chennai in December, selecting land for Vidya Gyan in Tamil Nadu. And so now that we've replicated a few institutions for the Shiv Nada Foundation, which are in the north, which is the Vidya Gyan schools, the Shiv Nada schools, the Shiv Nada University, the idea is to do the same in the south. It also gives us presence across the countries, and also India is a diverse country. India is a big country. So if we can do it in Uttar Pradesh, I think we can even do it in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, I think it's time the Jan Bhumi becomes a Karma Bhumi as well, right?
Absolutely.
And I think, yes, it'll be fabulous to have a Vidya Gyan in Tamil Nadu where the seeds germinated. Your passion for conserving our environment and creating self-sustaining ecosystems was the driving force behind the Habitats Trust. As we chat today, just a day before the World Sustainability Day, how relevant do you think it will be in the post-COVID-19 scenario? Is there really a need for all of us, especially as corporate entities, to go through a reset?
So I think it's not just us as corporate entities, it's us as human beings, really. When you look at, when you reflect back on all the news and all the WhatsApp messages that we've all got on how the coronavirus even came about. But we don't have to look at the coronavirus. I think I've mentioned this many a times before. Even before coronavirus, at least all those, Basti can talk about this, if you tune in from Delhi, even pollution doesn't choose who's privileged or not privileged. It's going to get you all. So, and now we are facing this with a much more severe strain, so to speak, which is the coronavirus. So all these kind of lead to a certain degradation that we've all been a part of, not just in India, all over the world. So I just hope that, as we come out of this crisis, like I mentioned before, even with, just in my general conversation, every crisis is also an opportunity. And in this case, it could be an opportunity to change. And, if 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 2 months or 3 months of lockdown in Delhi can significantly improve the air, more than how it's been in the last 20 years. If the Yamuna, as per news, can self-cleanse itself, I think it just goes to say that, if we can just change our habits around, and if we can just reflect on our needs versus wants, what do you need? What do you want? I think that you could, sustainable and all are fancy words for basically just changing behavior or behaving properly. So I think that if we can just come out as better versions of ourselves as individuals, it would be good. And then, then you start improving your environment, whether it's your workplace or whether it's your home or, whatever institution you work at.
Great. Thank you for that. Yes. Now, coming on to something that's close to my heart. Being part of a community of women who actually stand up for each other, we hear much on the diversity at corporate workplaces, gender equality, and yet women do face challenges of work-life balance. Do you believe that women in leadership are pushing the boundaries of gender and leaning in with other women who work with them?
So it's very interesting you ask that, because I often reflect on that myself. I don't necessarily consider myself a model for that, because there was a certain platform that I was provided and I was able to leapfrog some of the struggles that a lot of women go through in general corporate life. But, I also serve on the diversity committee of HCL Technologies, and at least tech companies do have a 27 to 30% percentage of women who actually work in roles. And a lot of the discussion that we hear over there is that what we all have to improve on is actually making the workplace ready for diversity. So the diversity is not just women. I mean, especially when we're in the tech community and we've got so many, people working all over the world. It could be the LGBTQ community. It could, but how do you make the workplace ready for diversity? And a way to make workplace ready is not so much telling just the women or the people of minority at the workplace that you need to lean in and push, but it's also training the reporting managers. Because I think that a lot of the pushback comes because the reporting managers, not enough has been invested in reporting managers to actually train them for diversity. And I was telling you yesterday how I was talking about diversity and how I was talking about even diversity in schools, and this is just not a problem at the workplace, but even if you look at trickle it down all the way to school levels. How do boys act with girls? How do girls act with boys? How do kids act generally with other kids who stand out or don't, fall into the typical stereotypical role? So I think that it's looking at much more of a behavioral and a mindset change, a lot of training required within the organization, and a lot of training required together. So, when we look at diversity, we're not talking about specifically woman or man. I think it's important to actually have all together. And it's amazing. I've spoken to so many women leaders, and sometimes when I ask them that, how did you cut across the glass ceiling, or how did you rise? And it's so funny. They said that, what, at some point we just stopped listening. And I think that, and you stop listening and you realize that I'm smart and what I have to offer in terms of work is valuable. And I think sometimes people of minority have to work just a little harder to make their voices heard or make themselves valuable. But I think once you're able to get that, luck plays a big role, but that's where we come in as a corporate, because you need to prepare reporting managers so that they're able to push you. Everybody requires a good champion, man or woman. And I think that the more champions you can build in an organization, the better it is.
Absolutely. What about you? You stand at the helm of a multi-billion-dollar corporate enterprise. You are a change agent in society. You constantly innovate in philanthropy. You're a mother of 2 young boys. I can go on if you want, but how do you basically do it all?
I'm a big believer of work-life choices. I'm not a believer of work-life balance, and of course, that just means that there are days that family is more important. There are days when work is more important, and within work there are different things which are more important. I think I always laugh at my husband and say, yeah, women have it hard because you actually make choices. Men don't have to. But I think that as long as you can make those choices, live with it, feel as least guilty as possible, and make everyone else around you feel even more guilty at your plight. And I think that it's fine. I think that's where at least I'm thankful that I live in India, because the support structure, whether it's my mother or my parents, or whether it's my husband's parents, there is a certain dependence that I have, and I acknowledge that fully. I wouldn't be able to do it without relying on them and a little bit of emotional blackmail. So it's okay.
True. I can see a lot of nods going on the panel and virtually among the audience. Yes. And I think just as long as you love what you do, it just makes sense, and it just falls into place. Yeah. I'd also like you to touch upon your belief that philanthropy should be taken up by the younger generation. How do you see this change taking place in our country?
So I think that, whether you call it philanthropy, whether you call it giving, or you call it CSR, really it's a matter of, individuals wanting to give not only that money, but more importantly, that time. And in fact, I think the one thing that if something about this COVID experience has kind of, that I've kind of reflected on, whether it's in all the countries in the West or whether it's in our country as well, I think everybody across the floor was ready to donate. Everybody was ready to donate. I want to donate to this cause. I want to donate. I mean, it could be the PM Cares Fund. It could be in your city. Everybody was ready to donate. But how many were ready to donate time and mind is the big difference, even if it's going to be virtual. So I think that if you think that in philanthropy, there is a lot of funding coming in, I think where especially the younger generation is able to add value is really their mind and their time, because philanthropy actually till at least more recently was also considered a very old person thing. So now what is it that people do now? I think that whether it's young people giving up a short span of their career and working for a Teach for India, for example, or it's people working in different NGOs and foundations. I mean, people that we have ourselves, for example, we've had students. We have one student. She was a Shiv Nada school student. Then she was a Shiv Nada University student, and now she's joined back Shiv Nada school as a teacher. So the thing is that I mean, to me, it's just telling the younger generation that how can you best possibly give back in whatever your capacity is. And I think most of that capacity is not necessarily what you can shell from your pocket, but what you can give in mind and time. And whatever interest and cause you pick up is completely your idea. I think there are many opportunities there. The good thing, Rinku, is that today the country that we live in, actually there are lots of opportunities that weren't there before, even when we were growing up. We had to look for those 1 or 2 foundations you could work. You went to TISS and you came out and you were figuring out who's going to hire me. Today, that's not the case. There are so many foundations, international and not, and educational institutions as well. I mean, the list goes on. So I think that they have a lot more opportunity, and philanthropy, CSR, giving, whatever you might want to call it, can actually be a proper career choice. And I also want to break this notion is that people who work in the non-profits, I mean, there's no reason why they should also command less salaries. I mean, it's a job. So, I think a lot of people, people leave their corporate career, they work in non-profit, you all of a sudden think that they've taken a pay cut. And I think there are some foundations, organizations there who are also paying very well. Because what do you actually pay people for? You pay for their talent and their mind. And if they're able to apply it to the corporate workspace, you need the same discipline and strategy even in the non-profit space. So I think that you should be that much more inviting to people to be able to have a proper livelihood as they would with a corporate job.
That's so true. And in fact, in India, we are noticing the opening up of the social sector, and a lot more youngsters taking that break and taking that path which is off the mainstream or the competitive that they normally get onto. So yes, so true. And I particularly like what you say about how a child joins, the Shiv Nadar school or Gyan academy at the age of 3, and finally the loop closes and they're ready to actually step out in the real world with their personality and their life completely transformed. Kudos to you for that, really. And I'd like to now get on to a little bit of a lighter side and ask you, you are half Tamilian, half Punjabi, married to a Punjabi, living in the heartland of Delhi. I must say that the Tamil squad here has been telling me that you are their Tamil Ponnu, while I keep joking saying that you are 2/3 Punjabi now. So tell us, what scores higher with you, dosa or paratha?
Oh my God, dosa, completely. And even husband. We completely, so it's really funny that my mother and father had a love marriage. Back in the day was obviously, unheard of. And, he had, of course, Vaspi knows this, but he had moved to Delhi. He was working with DCM, shining bright management trainee. And he met my mom and, they fell in love and they got married. And it's so funny because my mother says that, you know, he learned Hindi after having moved to Delhi. And even though he started his business here, at home, she's like, all of a sudden, one day I stopped having roti and rajma, and there was only rice at home. And then, you know, my grandmother, Tati, came and used to stay with us all the time. In fact, it's so funny that even though Tati, you know, my father's one of 8 siblings, and most of them are in Chennai or in Tamil Nadu. But she spent most of her time staying with us in Delhi. And so between going to Malai Mandir, between eating only her cooked food at home because my mother couldn't cook, I think we all transformed into certain habits, just certain habits. And so the home is definitely more like that. And then yeah, so we don't have any rotis and parathas. No.
So you've converted the Punjabis to South Indians now?
Totally. I mean, if you think about it, at least the South Indian part of it, don't you think it's exotic? Every Sunday becomes Dosa Day. You know, and they get so excited about every Sunday being South Indian Day. So I was just like, you know, we'll just have it as and when. We don't have to pretend that it's an exotic species, you know, and totally.
Great. You've definitely won the hearts of the audience here by your last answer. And before we open up for questions from the audience, and I'm sure there'll be quite a few, I'd actually just like to ask you, your parents have obviously played a very important role in molding you, shaping you. You've spoken about them in so many different ways, you know, through the conversation. What do you think is the one message that you got from them, which stands within you and is really part of who you are today?
Like I said, I think just taking risks and just
Okay.
seeing where it all falls. You know, I mean, I'm not just their daughter, but you know, my father's not a crazy man. So if he's taking certain risks with me, even at business, it's always calculated. So I think that you know, now that I'm a parent of 2 boys, and I find it very difficult. But as one becomes older, I think that if you can take that leap of faith and risk with your kids, allowing them to fall a little bit, get hurt a little bit, I think we'll all be doing a tremendous service, much more tremendous service than we realize.
Great. Thank you. That was absolutely fabulous. And we will now open for question and answers. Please type your question in the Q&A section and they'll prop up here for us. I'd, however, like to open with the first question that will come in live from one of our panelists and our immediate past chair, Dipali Goyal. Dipali, would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you, Rinku. It's great to be here. Very nice to hear you, Roshni. This was a very inspiring and a very real, honest talk, and I loved your thought process. There's a lot I picked up. I also have a couple of kids, so there's a lot that you spoke of which touched a chord with me, apart from the food, subtle changes in food that have happened in this house without me even realizing till you mentioned it, you know. So I'm also Punjabi, married in the South. So, you know, our house has pretty much adapted the way you spoke of. My question is very simple. I was going through your TEDx talk and I thought it was very interesting. You spoke about the pyramid and you spoke about, you know, the bottom of the pyramid and how you'd like to give a level playing field. And I feel that you, as well as Vasvi, both of you just stand out as women leaders, were sort of actually walking that talk. You know, both of you have set up schools. You're trying to level the playing field by opening up education to all strata of society. And is it, and during COVID times, what has come to, has almost as a big revelation is the use of technology. I mean, it's just an access point to level this field. So since you have the HCL hat, I wanted to ask you, has there been any work done in this direction where, you know, technology can be the leveling field for accessing education across all sectors? Is there anything particular that you have been doing or HCL is doing or any of your foundations are involved with? Or even Vasvi, the question is open to both of you.
So actually, I'm also the chairperson of the HCL Foundation. And That's the CSR arm of HCL Technologies. And, within the HCL Shiv Nada Foundation, we also have an institution, we have a program called Shiksha, which we probably spread around 600-700 schools in UP. And that uses actually an ICT-based model of education, which is taking the UP curriculum of primary classes, putting it into a software form, and actually running it alongside the teacher in the classroom in government schools. And the whole idea is that, just as our kids, when you go to school, you learn not only from your teacher, but you also learn from an engagement and technology. The kids do the same. And it's been amazing. So, technology is an equalizer. And what's happened during this COVID period has actually been amazing. I mean, our schools are shut. The government schools are shut. We had about 70,000, 60,000 kids who were part of, let's say, the Shiksha program. It's amazing how each government school teachers formed a WhatsApp group with their kids and classes. Even through WhatsApp, they give them assignments. After a week is finished, all the kids post assignments. So I think what's happened is that even though I think the definition of technology being an equalizer has also changed, because now every person, even in every part of rural India, by and large, has a phone or a smartphone, which can at least take a voice note, if not digital data. And you have to be quick on your feet to be able to say that given the limitations that you have, how are you going to impart education to them? And, one of the things, Dipali, that I also believe is that let's start. Let's not get it perfect. Let's start. We'll perfect it as time goes on, because every day missed is one day missed for someone else. For him or her, it's a lifetime of meaning. For us, it doesn't matter if our kids sit home and they miss 2 weeks of class. It's okay, we'll make it up, So I think that you just have to kind of go and get on with it. And so there are lots of technology interventions that we've done across all the foundations, Shiv Nada Foundation as well as the HCL Foundation. Now it's a matter of actually tweaking them to understand this new normal where schools may not open for a while. And, while the Shrirams and the Shiv Nada schools can handle it because we can Zoom and we can Microsoft Teams, what do you do for your children who are sitting all the way in rural India? Yeah. So I think that technology plays even more of a pivotal role to really, think out of the box and think with what they have available, not what you can provide. It doesn't matter what you can provide. It's what they can actually harness.
Yeah, similar answer to that. Even at the Shriram schools, which are in Delhi and NCR, we have a 25% population, which is the underprivileged, which is across the country, I think, with the RTE. So the only difference that I would say is that apart from the technology, thanks to the technology boom, at least everybody seems to have a phone at home. And if they don't have laptops and iPads, we are reaching out to them through their phones. But the difference is that the teachers are much more engaged with those students than they would be with the regular mainstream students. They are reaching out to them, they are sending them notes to their homes, they are speaking to their parents every day so that they can help them in homeschool. And they're making sure that otherwise they can come to the school, pick up their books, whatever help they need, they're going out of the way to make sure that those children have even more support than other children who have educated parents who can support them at home. And where there is no technology, which would be, we run many other foundation schools or even university students, students from Delhi University who come from all over the country, many of them do not have access to internet. So that becomes a much bigger problem. So one of the solutions for that is to actually send them a dongle. So, but the point is that this is the new normal and the kids are where they are and we have to reach out and make sure that we support them in whichever way we can. It could be different solutions for different people.
So true. Very interesting to have to hear both of you and your opinions. I mean, it is a new normal, and it's just so nice to know that people at the helm of these educational institutions are actually thinking about reaching out to each and everyone. So I think that's where true change will happen. So thank you guys.
Yeah, we have a few more questions. There's Dharitri Patnaik from Bhubaneswar who says, how do you balance between your professional work and philanthropy?
I mean, it's all work.
It's all
It's all work. And, you know, I don't want to balance between the two because I think both are very important. And to me, philanthropy is as much a professional career choice as much is my responsibility at HCL. And one feeds the other. You know, if HCL does well, Shiv Nara Foundation does well. And then there's HCL Corporation in the middle. And if, you know, Shiv Nara Foundation does well, I think it's great for HCL because we're able to also, you know, spread the message of the work that we're doing amongst our different stakeholders. So I think that it's very symbiotic. It's very relevant. It's not either or. There are days that HCL consumes me a lot more. I don't lie, but then that's what weekends are for. So I think that you just have to constantly keep on your toes. And, you know, the one thing that us women are amazing at, and for every man that's tuned in, unfortunately, you were not born with those skills. We can multitask. And that is a fact. It is. So, you know, and men weren't born with it. Let's establish that immediately. So we can. And yeah, so I think that there's no balance. They're just, as I said, there are just choices.
great. Thank you. There are a couple of questions from the students who are watching the program live on Facebook, and I'm going to take one of those. I have promised them that if there are more that we can't take on right now, we'll send it in to you and you can answer them later. So there's Monish Kumar from SSN Engineering College. He says, you spoke of diversity in the workplace and how it trickles down all the way to school. How can we as students try to be more inclusive? And how can we ensure that there is equality in our classrooms?
That's a great question. So I think you as students being more inclusive, if the opportunity is not available for you, let's say on campus, like if I reflect on just SSN, a lot of our students, majority of our students happen to be from the South, not necessarily Tamil Nadu, but also from Andhra and some of the other states. And if you think that you're not getting the kind of diversity, I think what you students can do is go and seek out that diversity. So for example, you know, speak to your teachers, speak to your deans, speak to your professors. Is there a study abroad program, for example? And the study abroad, I don't mean outside India. These days, from going from the south to the north is like going abroad. So, you know, is there a program where you can, you know, partner with some, get your universities or schools to partner with, let's say, schools and universities in other regions of the country? And, you know, for you to even go there and immerse yourselves in those cultures and those kind of environments, you would be exposed to diversity. It's very interesting you mentioned that. So at Vidyagyan, for the first time, I experimented last year and we got 20 students from the Northeast. And it was so funny because, you know, all my UP students' questions revolved around where have they come from? Are they Chinese? Are they Indian? What are the states? What do they eat? How do they live? And, you know, all these, we can laugh about these questions, but I think this is that one step ahead towards diversity, is learning about another culture. And like I said, I mean, India is basically a combination of multiple cultures in multiple states. So there's so much diversity here. So that's one way. And the other way is, I don't know, Mohit, if you're still at SSN or if you're looking for a job, maybe you should look for a job in the North. You'll get thrown in with so much diversity and you'll learn, and you know what, it'll probably build you as a leader. And for anybody in the North also, you know, take a leap of faith, come to the South, you'll meet people from different walks of life. You know, you'll learn about different cultures. And that's really what diverse upbringing is. In India, at least what's happened in the last 10 to 15 years is the number of private institutions and really good institutions which have opened up in the country have been significantly a lot of them bringing a certain global pedagogy. And like I said, that even within India, there is a lot of diversity and campuses which are truly able to offer that. And, you know, the in-campus experience, living on campus, you know, experiencing. I think that any of our campuses, not by ours, I don't mean Shiv Nara Foundation, but any of the newer campuses which have been come into place, or newer universities, you know, offer that kind of experience that you would get abroad, you know. And I think going abroad is a very personal choice. It pivots on, you know, parents' ability to be able to provide you with that opportunity. If you've got a scholarship, of course, that's that's an opportunity. And as far as SSN is concerned, I mean, SSN has in the last I think 20 years, 25 years, we've had a joint master's program with Carnegie Mellon, where a lot of our students stay 2 years with SSN, then for 2 years they go and study at Carnegie Mellon, graduate with an SSN as well as a Carnegie Mellon degree. The SSN is still a college of engineering, so in terms of the opportunities it can offer its students, it's still within the engineering sphere. But as we go towards transforming into a full university and opening up other different programs, then there will be more opportunities for a diverse education abroad or on campus.
Great. Thank you so much for all the questions that you've answered so patiently. We will be sending in some questions to your office because I can see some students who are trying to send in questions as well. It's been an honor to have you to start our year off with your presence, albeit virtually today. You represent corporate success, a woman in leadership position, and actively a social catalyst, things that Flow genuinely believes in as well. Thank you so much again, and we'll be in touch. I now call upon Senior Vice Chair Jayashree to make the closing remarks, please. Jayashree, you'll have to unmute yourself. Jayashree? Jayashree, you need to unmute. Is she talking? Oh my God.
I've unmuted, yeah.
Yes.
All firsts are special, but all of us would definitely remember this webinar, the first event of Wikiflow Chennai chapter in our home and on our screens. It's definitely special. So I thank our speaker, Ms. Roshni Malhotra. You were just awesome and very inspiring. That was a fabulous talk. Thank you for taking the time out from your busy schedule to share your story with us. I thank Ms. Vasvi Bharatram, past president of Wikiflow, for being our special guest. I thank Ms. Kavita Dutt, past president of Wikiflow and past chairperson of Wikiflow Chennai, for virtually inaugurating our launch event. I thank the IT team for taking all of us through this webinar with utmost technical fluency. I thank all our past presidents, past chairpersons, and GB members for being a part of our launch event. We are always grateful for your advice and support. I thank our committee for showing the same enthusiasm in putting together this virtual launch event. A webinar has turned out to be an opportunity wrapped up in a bow to have all the members from different cities to be a part of our launch event. So I thank all the attendees of the Chennai chapter and other chapters all over India. Please support us with the same vigor for all our upcoming events. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roshni, again. Thanks, Vasvi. Thank you, Kavita. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rinku.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.